Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
Welcome everyone to today's hearing. My name is Councillor Block and I shall be chairing this meeting. My colleagues Councillor Manro, Councillor Kuma and I comprise today's subcommittee. Cornelia Harding, who is the clerk to the subcommittee, will be minutes,ing the meeting. Alison Luff is the legal advisor to the subcommittee, and Anjali Garcha, licensing processing team leader, will introduce the report. In accordance with procedure, I shall invite the licensing officer to introduce the report and provide any clarification on any factual issues. Invite the applicant to present the application, answer any questions and call any witnesses, and invite those who have made representations or objections to make their representations, answer any questions and call any witnesses. At the conclusion of the hearing, the subcommittee, accompanied by the legal advisor and the committee democratic services officer, will retire to consider its decision. The decision will be given at the end of the meeting at approximately 4:45 p.m. today and confirmed in writing within 5 working days. If the panel cannot reach a decision today, you'll be notified in writing within 5 working days of the panel's decision. I will now ask if all of those present who are intending to speak could just introduce themselves, please. If I start with the applicants and their representative.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. It's Neil McCann here. I'm the solicitor for the applicant. I have with me the applicant, premises owner and proposed operator, Mr. Mardan.
Thank you. If I go to the police. Oh, no, we seem to have lost.
She came back on and then gone off again.
Okay.
Oh, she's back in.
Okay. I'll move to the noise and nuisance team.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mimi Stoop and I represent the council's noise and nuisance team.
And to the police, please.
Carrie, you're muted.
I've got problems with my internet, so I'm just going to move rooms, so apologies.
Okay.
And any objectors?
Oh. Well, I might want to make a representation.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford.
Thank you.
I will now invite the presenting licensing officer to introduce the application, please.
Thank you, Councillor Block. UK Business Investments Limited has made an application for a premises licence in relation to Atmosphere Restaurant, which is located at 36 to 38 Chase Road, Park Royal, NW10 8QN. 7 representations have been received for this application, and they are from the following: the Metropolitan Police, Ealing Council Noise and Nuisance Team, Ealing Council Licensing Enforcement and Compliance Team, and 4 other interested parties. The premises, we believe, is being constructed at the moment to become a restaurant. If I can assist you with any further clarification, then please do let me know. Thank you.
Chair, you're muted.
Thank you, Councillor Manro. Yes, so I'll move on to invite the applicants to present their application, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I anticipate that I'll be doing most of the talking this afternoon, but I'm hoping not to address you for too long because you'll have seen my written submissions that have made their way into the agenda pack. My client is hoping to open an Italian restaurant in East Acton on Chase Road. I have to say, when I first visited the premises, I was slightly dubious about the location. But then Mr. Mardan, the owner and proposed operator, pointed out to me the large number of new residential flats that have been constructed, are being constructed within walking distance across the train tracks away from the premises. And also, of course, that there is going to be the new Oak Common railway station built very nearby in respect of HS2. And then it made sense. My client is got into the area hopefully before prices rise, and an area that will change considerably over the next few years. And therefore, he's paid, I think it's safe to say, a slightly over market rate for the freehold of the premises. If I could maybe take you, Chair, to the layout of the premises, I think it's at page 40 of the committee report. I can talk you through this very briefly. So the ground floor is to remain an industrial unit. I think in due course, if the area does actually change, as we hope it does, there might be an application in the future to extend the restaurant if it proves to be a success. But at the moment, the plan is, if this application is granted, to have the restaurant over the first and second floors. And the first and second floors are accessed by way of a staircase or 2 lifts. If you go to the first floor, you'll see there is a ladies', a gentleman's toilets, and also disabled toilet provision. And the plan is to have an open kitchen to add a sense of theatre and also a terrace on that floor. And then if you go to the second floor, we again have more toilets, and there's something that says a bar, just to reassure you and your colleagues that this is a service bar for waitresses, and also the hope is to have stools around it so people can dine from stools at the bar. And also there is a small terrace there. If I can go straight on to the representations, the reason we're here. Now, I came to this application sort of rather late in the day. And I think the first thing I noticed that we have a large number of conditions of an onerous nature. Now, I fully understand why they've been suggested. I think in my client's naivety, the premises license application, when first made, was rather scant, and there wasn't much in the way of detail in the operating schedule. But hopefully we have changed that. But the conditions that have been suggested, I think, are more applicable to those of a nightclub as opposed to a restaurant. And therefore, if you and your colleagues are minded to grant this application, we'd respectfully ask if you could actually look at the conditions and consider whether all of them are necessary in their present form to uphold the licensing objectives. In respect of the concerns that have been raised, hopefully those concerns have been eased by the written representations that were lodged this time last week. I did invite further discussions. I've not heard from anyone. I hope that is a positive rather than a negative sign. But if I can go through the concerns that were raised then, just in case they haven't been addressed. I think the first one, and the most significant one mentioned by a number of parties, is that of parking. Now, Chair, you'll be aware that this is generally an issue covered by planning committees, and also illegal parking is covered by other legislation. Indeed, parking itself isn't referred to in your licensing policy. It's generally the case that restaurants in London don't have dedicated parking, with patrons arriving by foot, by taxi, or by tube or bus. And we anticipate a number of our patrons will arrive either by foot, by coming from the new flats that have been built in North Acton, or from nearby North Acton station. However, we do have the advantage. We have 8 dedicated parking spaces ourselves attached to the restaurant. And you'll see from our written submissions that we have a deal in principle to have another 10 spaces if a premises licensing granted. Since then, we've had discussions also with the warehouse opposite. They have copious amounts of parking that's only used during the day, and we're looking to put an agreement in place that we can use their parking if need be in the evening time. The second point is the terminal hour. Now, after discussions with the police, the hours sought were reduced, but you'll see they are slightly in excess of the core hours for a town centre. Now, question mark, is this a town centre given the geographic location? But as your policy states, every application is considered on its own merits. Just because it's outside core hours doesn't mean those additional hours automatically get refused. And your policy looks at various concerns that will trigger an application to only be granted core hours rather than in excess. Now, we don't think any of those concerns are triggered. And we say this for following reasons. Firstly, this is a dedicated restaurant with full table service and table meals. Secondly, there's no separate bar area. Some restaurants have a busy restaurant, a separate standalone bar. That's not the case here. You can't get alcoholic drinks without having a table meal. Thirdly, there's to be no regulated entertainment, no live music, no recorded music at all. Fourthly, the residential accommodation is not sufficiently close to the premises that in our submission it can be disturbed from people talking on the terrace. Fourthly, the SIA provision is above and beyond what we say is required for the operation of a restaurant. And finally, of course, and crucially, we're not located in a community impact zone. And we say for those reasons, Chair, it's not necessary to reduce the hours if you mind to grant of licensing objectives. The third issue, and this was mentioned by licensing, and that was a desire to curb the terraces to mean they were closed from 9:30 p.m. So I think the same arguments really apply. I mean, the roof terraces should only be closed early if there's potential for public nuisance. And we say that simply can't be the case because the residents are too far away. And the trouble is, if you have a roof terrace for 9:30 close, it really doesn't impede upon evening service. If you sit down for a meal at 8 o'clock, you might be finished an hour and a half, but you might be finished in 2 or 2.5 hours. And therefore it effectively knocks out the terraces for the evening meal trade. If I can touch upon very briefly about policy, I've already mentioned policy a few times today, and it's mentioned in my written submissions. But I think the point of your policy is that it welcomes restaurant applications. In your introduction to your policy at paragraph 2.6, it says there'll be a preference for seated premises where food and drink is consumed by table service, which is the case here. And then it goes on to say paragraph 2.93 that such applications, i.e. restaurant applications, are encouraged. I'll wrap it up just by saying that I don't need to tell you this is a very difficult time for the hospitality and leisure industry. Mr. Marden has invested a significant amount of money in this premises and is keen to develop the site as soon as possible. He's listened to the concerns that have been raised and the objections, and he has addressed them. We've reduced the hours that are being sought. We've removed non-standard timings. We've removed any request for regular entertainment, and numerous conditions have been discussed and agreed. This is an application for a restaurant. Because of its conditions, it cannot become a nightclub. It cannot become a standalone bar, and therefore we say the application should be looked upon favourably. So I will leave it at that and just say we urge you to give Mr. Marden a chance, allow him to succeed, and to grant the application as sought. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now ask the police if they have any questions for the applicant.
Chair, sorry, I don't seem to have any of the submissions or the amended conditions or hours that's been put forward. I haven't seen any.
Yes. Do you have an older agenda pack? If you go, I think, where are we? We're on page 77 of 98 is the report from Keystone Law, which has a lot of the new conditions that they've agreed to and the new opening hours. So the if you go to page 78 of 98, the opening hours.
Yeah, I'm just gonna
have
a quick look.
Should I move on to Mimi Stipu while you have a look
Yeah,
at that?
don't mind.
Great. All right. I'll invite the noise and nuisance team.
Apologies, I'm looking at the conditions because I'm a bit confused with regards to. Sorry, I'm reading the conditions as well. Because page 19 of the agenda pack, it states that they are requesting recorded music. So I'm a bit.
So I can clarify that point if that assists.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously, I'm in your hands, Chair. You might want to adjourn for a few minutes. It seems that the submissions that were circulated last Wednesday haven't found their way to everybody concerned, but those submissions actually formally withdraw recorded music. The application form says that music is only background, but I mean, Mr. Marden is not a licensing lawyer, therefore didn't understand that if it's only background incidental music, it's not regulated. Hence, I formally withdrew that part of the application.
Okay, makes sense.
If I could just say something, it's Cornelia here. The same pack that Mr. Niall McCann has, the responsible authorities also have the same agenda pack. They had the same pack at the same time. I don't know if it would help if Mr. Niall McCann could perhaps refer to the pages that the conditions are in that he's referring to.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at the conditions now. Thank you.
Okay, well, I might go ahead then and invite Councillor Crawford as an objective. She has any questions. I'll come back to the noise, nuisance and police. No?
I think Councillor Crawford is on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. McCann said that there's going to be 10 more parking spaces, potentially. I'd like to know specifically where they're going to come from. And he also talked earlier about all the future development. And all these developments will probably end up with the roads and the markings on the roads changing. There could be double yellow lines, could be a cycle lane. And although Mr. McCann said parking is not an issue, the point about the lack of parking spaces relates mostly to dispersal at night. So I would like him to clarify that, because whatever the conditions and the hours are, he may, they have also stated that they'll be applying for 10s for many, many festivities, which is rather bizarre because it's meant to be a restaurant. So I'd welcome Mr. McCann to talk about those issues. Thank you.
Mr. McCann. Oh, you're on mute, Mr. McCann.
I can't get through a whole hearing without being on mute at least once. Yes, thank you, Chair. In answer to your questions from your colleague, the second annex to my written submissions has the agreement in principle for the additional parking spaces. Those parking spaces are located towards the back of the property, and it says in the report, we're happy to have a valet service. We're hoping to be an upmarket restaurant, and that service will be provided. In terms of future developments, WR lines, etc., I'm conscious this is a licence committee and I'm not a planning lawyer. However, if new developments are looked at, you have potential Section 106 agreements, you have various reports done into traffic flows, etc. And there's the thing called an agent of change principle. So any new development, for example, a block of flats with 100 units, will have to be, if this application is granted, be constructed in such a way that those residents cannot be disturbed from an existing premises, such as my client's restaurant. In terms of the temporary event notices, I didn't mean that we would be having temporary event notices. I mainly said that we have a statutory right to temporary event notices, just like every premises up and down the country does, whether it's licensed or not. Because for a temporary event notice, if even environmental health or the police think that it won't uphold licensing objectives, they can object, they can serve a notice, and ultimately the 10 cannot be granted. So I wasn't giving information that we would be actually using 10s. I don't think we will, but just to say that that is an option for all premises. Does that answer
Not quite. May I come back on the parking issue, Chair? Because the rear of these units, as they are at the moment, I would like to know how potential patrons will access those units, because the side alley, there's a side road which is actually gated at night, and I don't know how they would get back there. I don't believe there is any easy access to and to the rear, and also if the restaurant is going to be open during the day, patrons are going to have to cut through the units parking, because frankly I imagine priority will be given to the commercial units who will be using those parking spaces. I think there is an issue. There's and it's very much the dispersal. The parking relates to the dispersal issues that residents have been impacted by in the past along North Acton Road.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, the parking spaces aren't behind that closed off gate pad anyway. And in any respect, we're going to be offering a valet service. I mean, what I would say is that, I just reiterate, the vast majority of restaurants don't have any parking at all, and we have parking during the day for at least 8 cars. But we're bang next door to a train station. We've got excellent communications, and also we have what we hope will be our client base. Our customer base will be the new block of flats. So we think a lot of people won't be arriving by car. Of course, if they do arrive by car and they park illegally, their cars get clamped, they get fined. It's as simple as that. It's no difference whether it's a restaurant or a shop or any other means a person would like to drive to.
Thank you. I will go back to Mimi Stupu to ask if she has any questions now.
I do. I have a few questions with regards to the with dispersals. I can see you tried to address it. Sorry, I lost the page. Give me a second. Sorry, apologies. Found it. You mentioned a copy of the premises dispersal policy shall be made available at the premises for inspection by a police officer or an authorised officer of the London Borough of Ealing. Would it be possible to see that dispersal policy beforehand and before the, well, I don't know, in the next couple of weeks, let's say?
Chair, can I respond to that?
Yes, please.
I mean, certainly we're happy to have the condition amended, but before we open flights and activities, that dispersal policy be shared and available for comment. I don't think we can necessarily have the next couple of weeks because a lot of work needs to carry out. I think until you actually start constructing a place and get a feel, I think that any dispersal policy will be slightly premature, but we're certainly happy to have it disclosed and sent to all necessary parties for comment prior to opening.
That was going to be my next question in regards to the planning, because I don't know what stage you are at the moment. So what's the current planning application, or when are you thinking of opening? Or
planning is currently pending. I think we've got one objection thus far, but certainly we're due to have a result any day now. But clearly, without planning, we can't open. We need both licensing and planning in place. So yeah, I think realistically, Mohammed, perhaps you could actually just email me with the desired opening date. I think we're sort of counting our chickens before they're hatched because a lot of work needs to take place. But perhaps maybe, Chair, if you can come back to me in a few minutes, I'll get the answer to the precise opening date, all things going well.
Right. I think you have it down as the 1st of August, according to the papers.
I think that's very optimistic. Operators are optimistic by nature. I'm always slightly more pessimistic about how long these things take, but there you are.
Okay, when you mentioned the dispersal policy, are you going to address both pedestrians and vehicles, or, as you know, so I'll quickly explain why we have these concerns. As you know, there are a lot of premises around the area, again with no parking, and we tend to have problems with them. I'm not saying that this premise is going to cause problems, but we're trying to address these issues before it happens. So if you remind me, what's the capacity of the venue? I think, are you on mute?
Right, 190 or thereabouts?
190.
About that. That's sort of be when it's full without any COVID restrictions, fingers crossed.
Okay, so as I said in my objection, these are my concerns with regards to, I don't know, let's say 60 cars turning up at once, and where are they going to park? Are they all going to? So yeah, that's my main issue, and that's why I want to see that addressed in your dispersal policy. how are you going
Yeah.
to manage that? And the same with people walking back to the station. If you have a large group, are they going to cause problems on the way to the station, passing residents? And are you going to have, let's say, a cab company that can come and collect your patrons, and trying to minimize that when it comes to public nuisance?
Exactly. I mean, as you would expect, we would have a dedicated cab company. We will have SIA later at night to ensure people do actually leave quietly. We will be a restaurant, so we don't alcohol consumption will be very high. But what would be very useful, Jen, I appreciate I should be addressing this to you, but I think it'd be very useful as applications granted to have the proper dialogue and actually have a meeting on site. And we actually send you a dispersal policy for comment, and we take aboard your comments. I find sometimes with dispersal policies, they're prepared by operators, they sit in a drawer and they're never seen again. I think it's actually much better to work with statutory authorities, because likewise, you will know specific concerns for an area we don't. And also we know specifically how we operate in our customer base. So yeah, certainly if this application is granted, we'd be happy to have that condition sort of beefed up so there was a proper dialogue prior to any opening.
Okay, thank you. One more question with regards to, so it's 100% you're withdrawing, you're not having regulated entertainment, and so only background music, even on the terrace, every part of the building, correct?
Correct, no speakers on the terrace and only background music inside.
Okay, that addresses my other concern with regards to loud music being played on the terrace, which would have caused issues with the residents on North Acton Road.
I completely agree. So yeah,
Okay.
that's removed. Yeah.
Okay, I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move on to Kerry Smart.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. Just one question from me to the applicant. What experience have you got in running such an establishment?
Yeah, this is going to be the second Atmosfera. There's currently one in Vauxhall and Arch. You'll see the pictures are in the statement of case. I have to say, it'd be lovely to have pictures there with patrons and all laid out, but obviously it's closed and it doesn't have outside space, so we can't open at the moment. But yeah, that is currently an Atmosfera Italian restaurant, and the menu and the wine list, to be perfectly frank, have been taken from that. We hope to replicate what we've got there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll now ask the councillors, Councillor Manro and Councillor Kuma, if they have any questions.
Yeah, I've got my.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the first one I think maybe for Anjali, perhaps it's the page 13 of 98. The system reference number says not currently in use. I just wanted to know the reason that the unique reference number for the application generated by the system. I understand that this has been happening, but I just wanted to know why it's not currently in use.
Page 13. Oh, so the application that's been submitted by the applicant.
Yes.
So that is the actual application that's made online, and because it's made online and it's not checked, a number isn't generated on our system for that until it's been checked and the correct fee has been made. Is that what you're looking at, page
13, just right at the top, section 1 of 21.
Yeah, it says system reference not currently in use.
Yes.
So that is actually the application that is submitted by the applicant, either through UK or through our website. Because they're making the application, the system doesn't generate a premises license or an application number for that until it's been processed. That's something that through government or through our website. That's why it's been allocated a system reference at that point.
But it will get it will get a system reference when you say. Okay, I'll leave it at that. the other thing was page 23 of 98, where you need specification of the licenses premises supervisor. It's completely blank.
Because they did a designated premises supervisor, yeah.
They're done. Okay, so that answers that question. And then the other one is page 34 of 98 and 35. It looks incomplete as well. So just have a look at that too.
Age 34, yes.
Yeah, it doesn't give the, again, does the same apply? Who is the DPS?
When an application is made, when an application is made, and normally on premises that haven't already been constructed or partially constructed, they sometimes don't appoint a designated premises supervisor at that point. If a premises license is granted and a DPS is not appointed, obviously they can't have alcohol as, you know, one of their licensable activity. But I'm assuming if this premises application is granted, that the applicant will put in an application to appoint a designated premises supervisor to the licensing processing team at that point.
Of course, yeah, that's correct. And we'll spell licensing correctly as well in the application.
That's right.
Okay, I need you to clarify that. So can I go ahead with the questions that I have?
Yes, we do.
Okay, all right. Right, so the one clarification, I know this has been mentioned at least 3 times now, but I want clarification on the dining capacity, because it's ranging from 190, 200, 210 and 250. So we've got these figures floating. I actually need to get that clarified. I know you've said 190 seated if there are no COVID restrictions. And also, does this include the rooftop seating? Or is there any seating, because you have a roof terrace as well. Is that going to be used? Just need clarification on that.
Yeah, Chair,
is it open air? Is it open air?
So there are 2 terraces which are open air. The capacity we referred to is 210. In reality, whether we'd actually get the number of tables and chairs in and still be comfortable, probably not. But it's always, I think it's safe to have a capacity that's slightly higher than the reality, just to give you flexibility. But you're looking in the region of 200 tables and chairs, and with nobody standing, obviously. When I say chairs, I do mean stools as well, potentially around that bar on the 2nd floor.
So the bar on the 2nd floor will people be seated around it? Because it said, I think one of the things mentioned, or the conditions mentioned, was alcohol will only be served with food. That includes snacks.
That's correct. I mean, when I say bar, Councillor, I mean a dining bar. So not in a restaurant, you'll sit on a high stool, and you'll be rather than sitting opposite, you'll be sat next to your friends. I mean, Mr. Mohammed has just clarified that he doubts he would ever exceed 140 covers at any one time. Okay. So the 250 figure flowing is probably I think that's optimistic. Okay. The other thing I wanted to find out was the schedule for deliveries. Doesn't appear, I haven't read anything on that, how is that going to function, or is that something that you're... Yes, Councillor. It's part of the traffic situation as well. So, and what are the timings that will take place? Councillor, I mean, as you'll be fully aware, it's quite common to see conditions on a licence that state the deliveries have to be made at a certain time. Normally, those conditions state that they can't be made too early or too late because of residents living cheek by jowl for premises. This is not the case here, hence no condition was put for the application, and certainly I don't recall any of the statutory authorities asking for such a condition. But certainly, if that is a concern to you, we'd be happy to have any sort of sensible condition that is normal for restaurant use.
Okay, that's good enough. Now, the 6 SIA that you mentioned, are they also going to be responsible for the noise and the patrons leaving, exiting and entering, or
Yes,
on a daily
Councillor.
basis, 7 days a week?
Yes, I mean, this is what I alluded to really in the
Yes.
opening submissions about the conditions. I'd be interested here from Metropolitan Police. I fully understand when you have a license that is rather sketchy on details, but look as though it could become a nightclub or a serious late night bar, having sufficient numbers of SIA is very important. 6 were asked for. I think my client, Ms. Mohammed, was just desperate to sort of please and actually crack on with this application, that he agreed to 6. I have to say, in my 20 years of licensing, I don't think I've ever seen 6 door supervisors on a restaurant style license, unless, the capacity was, 1,000. So certainly I understand that's been agreed, and if that's from a license, so be it. Anyway, I slightly digress, but yes, the SIA are there to meet, to greet, to ensure that people leave quietly and they don't cause a disturbance. In reality, I think their role will be more of a meet and greet role, with it being an Italian restaurant. But yeah, should the wrong type of crowd do try and actually get into premises, they're there to control things on the phone with police if necessary.
Okay, and I know you've mentioned the number of staff. I've read that, and obviously at this stage, it's what we've seen on the report. But how many at any one time will be present? I know the chefs are there. I've read that, and
Councillor, I don't want to give you misleading information. Can I come back to you in a few minutes? I'll ask my client to WhatsApp me the figure.
Okay, that's fine. And I know you've discussed the whole parking thing. It's also been raised by Councillor Crawford, and I've seen the confirmation of the additional 10 places, which is fine. But you said you're looking at more to provide more more provision for parking. What if this, you don't get an agreement and it does not happen?
Well, that's. Yeah, I didn't want to mislead the committee. I'd say we're looking to get it. Clearly, we have agreement in place for 10. And I would say that any further agreements we have with our neighbours can be shared and discussed with environmental health if this application is granted before we finalise the dispersal policy. So yeah, we're in negotiations. I can't say it's a done deal, so I don't want to be misleading.
Okay, and the smoking area you've identified as both terraces will have the smoking area?
Yes, both terrace, Chair, but also the terrace is only facing one side, so each terrace will have a dedicated smoking area, but we'll also have a smoking area at the front of the building if people are dining inside and don't want to go into the terrace. So there is room at the front to have a smoking area, and of course we'll have the SIA door supervisors to supervise that area.
Okay, I mean, I haven't seen a business plan, but you may be working on that. And you answered the fact about what experience you have. I realized that there is another restaurant there. I just wanted to ask Mr. Madan if he actually understands the Challenge 21, because I think there was a bit of confusion. He wasn't sure, and he did ask the questions.
Certainly, yes, Ms. Mohammed can answer that. I mean, in terms of your query about staff, it's minimum 15 staff at any one time.
Okay, 15 staff at any one time. Okay, and I mean, I haven't seen COVID restrictions mentioned anywhere, but you've said something on that.
Yeah, Councillor, I don't think.
Yeah,
again,
that's something that no
I'm hoping
one's
COVID will be very much in the rear view mirror by the time this premises gets to open. But of course, if there are restrictions in place, there will be the appropriate risk assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Councillor Munro.
Yeah, I mean, I've only got one real sort of question, because most of my queries have been answered. The issue seems to be that in this application, there isn't enough detail around how this premises is going to operate. I mean, a large premises with up to 200 guests. I think 100, I don't know how many covers, but maximum capacity about 210, maybe a bit less. I mean, I won't argue about, 190, 200, whatever it is. In an area which is already crowded with other premises opening late at night, now I was a bit shocked that the applicant agreed to the SIAs, because that does worry me somewhat. What sort of premises, how it's going to operate, and what it's actually going to do. Because it sounds, I mean, if it sounds and squeals like a restaurant come nightclub, this looks like it. And I'm just wondering, we don't have any details about how it's actually going to operate and what's going to happen. And that, I would say, is a worry that I have. And I would like to get some understanding of how is this place going to operate? 100, 190 people there, late night. What's with the SIAs there? Is it a nightclub? Is it a restaurant nightclub? What are you actually wanting to do with this place? And I don't get a feel for that.
Okay,
that's my real issue.
I'm hoping that my written report does elaborate, but in terms of the application, what we're seeking to do, my first question was with Mr. Mardan was, why have you agreed to 6 door supervisors for a restaurant? And he probably won't appreciate me saying this. He said to me, if a police asked for a condition, I thought you had to accept it. And I think there wasn't enough of a challenge at that stage to explain to the Metropolitan Police on his behalf that what he's seeking to do is not appropriate to have 6 door supervisors. But he stuck with it. I mean, certainly the condition has been agreed. So if your mind's put on the license, he will suck it up and he'll pay that money and have a door supervisors. The way that the premises license application is now granted, it cannot be a late night bar and it cannot be a late night nightclub. And I say this because we haven't got regular entertainment as a licensed activity. And we've got all these conditions that have been agreed that are at page 78, 79 and 80 and 81 of the committee report. And there's maybe you have the restaurant conditions, you have that there can't be alcohol served in the bar area, you have waiter service, you have table food, you've got full CCTV, you have no open vessels being taken outside. Councillor, you can read them as well as I can. And what this means, that if Mr. Mohammed were to suddenly have a change of heart or we were to transfer the licence, this is an absolute bang to rights review or criminal prosecution that attracts up to 6 months imprisonment and an unlimited fine. If he starts having live music or recorded music, boom, it is a criminal offence. It is carrying a licence, carrying on activity without the appropriate licence. If he doesn't serve table food to everybody, again, breach of condition, criminal offence. So what I would say, Chair, is that we ask to be given a chance to prove that we can run this premises responsibly. And if we don't, there are a number of powers that can be taken very quickly to mean that Mr. Mardan's investment will be a very bad investment very quickly because he'll be stuck with the premises without an alcohol licence for any description.
Sorry, can I just come back to you? Because what I don't understand is, on the one hand, the application seems to suggest that your applicant, Mr. Madan, is an experienced operator, running a restaurant, large restaurant in central London.
Yep.
And secondly, you then claim he doesn't understand, he agreed because he didn't understand that you didn't have to agree to police conditions. You can't have it both ways. You can't say this guy's an experienced operator who runs a restaurant and you've given us the menu and all the rest of it in central London. And then on the other hand, claim he doesn't understand what he's agreeing to. It's either one or the other. Either he's an experienced operator who runs another large restaurant in central London, or he's not.
Yes.
I don't quite see this naivety. Where is it coming from?
Councillor, I think that it is possible to run a successful restaurant and when asked to have conditions put on the licence to accept such conditions. I've seen it happen on numerous occasions. that people thought them when conditions were asked for by statutory authorities, they had to be accepted. He was hoping that the application would be granted without any objections whatsoever. So I don't think that is the case, but even so, if he has to have 6 store supervisors, he is prepared to do it. He has faith in this project and he thinks it will work. I'm just saying that I think it is excessive. And I think actually what he thought was doing the responsible thing is backfiring in your opinion, because you think it actually gives the impression it's going to be something that's not. What I would just say is that it can't become something that's not, and if it does, it won't be that something else for more than a couple of weeks.
Okay.
But yes, I fully understand, you know, your querying in that respect. But I think it's not naivety of running a licensed premise. I think it's naivety of a licensing process.
Right. I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, in terms of the type of business that's going to be in a restaurant, obviously, you know, you've agreed to the substantial meals, and that's good to see. However, I'm just wondering about the hours. You know, most people don't go for a meal at midnight. So, you know, what type of kind of premise will it be? Because, you know, do you really require these extended hours that you're asking for, if it is just going to be a kind of large but local neighbourhood restaurant?
So we realise we're new to the area, and there's a certain amount of head scratching. We would firstly like to have a premises licence that allows us to open and prove ourselves. And so if you and your colleagues have concerns that granting most additional hours at this stage are too risky, of course we'd happily accept the core hours premise licence grant, and we would open on that basis. But we'd also hope if business was brisk, we'd be coming before you again in a year's time or 2 years' time, potentially asking to extend that hours, but there has to be a little water under that bridge before.
Okay, and then the terrace, obviously the police have asked for 9:30. Was it the police? I think
it's the licensing authority last time.
Licensing authority, yeah. Which you are seemingly not happy to agree to. So what hours are you looking to keep that open until?
We would like to keep it open, Councillor, as late as possible. I mean, I've been dining on roof terraces for last year because of COVID restrictions, and it's very pleasant when the weather is suitable. And certainly you'll see conditions on licenses that restrict use of gardens or terraces to 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. But that's because there's been objection from residents living very nearby saying we can't sleep because of a noise coming from our terrace. This is not the situation here. I think it's one of the mantras of the Guidance and the Licensing Act that conditions should only be put on a license if they're necessary to uphold the licensing objectives. So what we're saying is that it's not necessary to put a condition on the terrace to control public nuisance. And if in the summertime we can have people out there in extra covers enjoying a meal until close, that is important revenue. I mean, let's be clear about it, we're running a business. And to have to actually close a terrace at 9:30 and take people inside, or not have those covers booked because people will be coming inside sort of earlier, I think would be a crying shame and wouldn't actually achieve anything in respect of the licensing objectives. So that's why we've asked for no restriction.
Restrictions. Okay, and then about the dispersal policy, we've seen in the reports from the noise and nuisance team and the police about concerns around antisocial behaviour and so forth. So, you know, it is really important that to get guarantees that you're concerned about this as well, and that you wouldn't want to add to the problems there. So, you know, in terms of if we're looking at you want to stay open till late, and you've got up to 200 people leaving, how are you going to ensure that your clientele aren't going to be drunk, leaving at 1 a.m. and into the mayhem that could ensue?
Exactly. I mean, certainly, I don't want to sort of orally explain the dispersal policy now, which I think will need to be a travelling draft between ourselves and the statutory authorities. But I think, one, we are a restaurant. So in terms of dispersal, I know it's a sweeping statement, but people leaving a restaurant tend to be quieter and don't tend to be drunk, whereas people leaving a bar can be noisy, they can be shouting, they kind of had too much drink. Secondly, we'll have people leaving in dribs and drabs over a period of time. It is not sort of a nightclub when all of a sudden the lights go on and music stops and we go, oh, we've got to go home, and leaves en masse. It's people leaving steadily. And also we have, we are very happy to have an SIA provision, albeit we think 6 is excessive. And that is the best way. People leaving, if they're being noisy, they can totally be quiet, and reminded that it's not immediately residential, there are residential premises down the road. They can be pushed in the right direction, etc. So that helps enormously with dispersal. And of course, some people will be sort of driving. Again, taxis will have somebody there in terms of a door supervisor who can tell the taxi where to actually park up, go and get the patron, say your taxi's arrived, etc., rather than people wandering the streets trying to find their taxi. Clearly, the dispersal will possibly be more complicated than that, but that is what we're sort of looking at. That will be the basis of it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCann. So if there's no more questions, I'll move on to the representations cases.
No, I do. I've had my.
Councillor, please do come in.
Okay. I also wanted to know, when you're doing your business plan, I mean, the training of staff was one of the things that I wanted to know. The 15 staff, or will they, are they going to undergo training to understand all the licensing policies and objectives? Is that something that you are intending to do?
We're intending to do it, Councillor, and it's actually a condition on the licence as well. It is number 16, condition number 16, page 80. So yeah, I mean, that's just good practice, but we're happy to discuss it a condition of the licence.
Okay, and I didn't get an answer to my question about Challenge 21, and the reason I'm asking it again is, if Mr. Madan has been running a business already, surely he would know what Challenge 21 means. But does he understand it now?
Well, I think I have to ask Mr. Madan to comment on that. Yeah. Mr. Madan, can you turn your microphone on and just explain Challenge 21?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry.
You had a query that when it was questioned about Challenge 21, I think you were concerned that it meant that under 21s couldn't come into the venue, but
yes,
it actually means that.
Yes. My question was at the time, I wanted to understand whether over 21, does it mean just like people who can have a drink, or like serving alcohol to over 21, or is it, I mean, can a family coming in with two of them, 15-year-old, obviously we're not going to provide any alcohol for younger age, but we just wanted to know that, is it just an entry as in over 21, or is it just a serving alcohol for over 21?
I think we're talking slightly cross purposes here.
Yeah, we are. It's not that. I actually wanted to know if you understand what Challenge 21 means now. I've read everything that you'd written about the age thing, but
yeah.
My question is that if you have been running a business already, you should be aware of Challenge 21, but you were questioning it.
Yes,
do you
yes.
understand it?
Yes.
Do you understand
I just
what
wanted to
it
make sure at the time, to ask you, that was it. But I understand, yes.
I think, Councillor, what my client understands from operating restaurants is that you don't serve under 18s, and you ask people who look under a certain age, depending, maybe 21, 25, for identification. I certainly think, there is a condition on the licence that talks about staff training, and I'm not touting for more work here, but I would be very happy to give an undertaking that I will sort of personally be there at the staff training to actually ensure that the concepts such as Challenge 21 and Challenge 25 are properly understood, not just by Mr. Mardan, but by all members of staff.
Yeah, thank you, because that's important. And lastly, on your submission, under conclusion, you actually say that the original application made admittedly lacked detail.
Yeah.
This was simply due to being poorly advised as to the application process, as opposed to a lack of consideration. I actually would like some explanation on that, and if you can elaborate, because it's...
Mr. Mardan was approached by somebody who describe themselves as a licensing consultant. I have to be slightly careful when I say this is recorded. A significant amount of money was charged, and that was the application was submitted. So I think he put his faith in somebody who didn't perhaps have the licensing knowledge that they portrayed to have. Does that answer? I have to be slightly careful when I say, Councillor, but certainly when the representations were received, I was instructed, look, it is what it is. I'm a licensing specialist, so hence I said look at it and see that certain things were slightly misleading, or certain aspects were too brief for what I'd expect of a new premises license application.
Yes, because I wanted to make sure, because it doesn't actually say any of that, and you've given me the reason why, but it could also actually say that our licensing team gave poor advice, which
that wasn't the intention. I was trying to not embarrass Mr. Marden too much, and I realise it's slightly sensitive that he's paid money for advice which I don't think was great advice. So that's what I was referring to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, so I will now invite the police to make their representation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So as we know, that this is a new premises licence application for 36 to 38 Chase Road. As we all know, it's currently a single-storey dry cleaning company, which is based on an industrial estate. The applicant is looking to convert it into a very large 2-storey restaurant bar with rooftop. As it's been discussed, the application was really vague. The applicant has failed to provide a business plan detailing how he's going to operate the premise whilst conducting licensable activities, and failed to propose any proportionate and adequate condition to promote the licensing objectives. Originally, the proposed hours were excessive and way beyond core hours. As you can see through my communication trail with the applicant, he agreed to, so I've just lost my page, he agreed to core hours. I can't see on what page the applicant has proposed additional conditions. Can someone just let me know the page number, please?
Page 78 of 98. There are 20 conditions after the agreed reduced hours sought.
Okay. And those conditions that are there, that's been listed, are they the ones that the applicant is now proposing?
Yes, I think.
Check that.
Although I think Mr. McCann is asking for reduced SIA numbers.
It's slightly more nuanced. I mean, clearly we are happy if the application is granted to those conditions, but we would ask the committee maybe to look as to whether, especially the number of SIA is actually.
I think originally I said 5 SIA, just purely for the size of the premise. I can see that the applicant has come forward with extended hours, which again are in excess of core hours.
Yeah.
Bear with me, I just need to go back up to. The police have concerns in relation to the parking. I know you've now come back and said that there's going to be allocated spaces, but the location of the premise is within an area that is well known to the police and the local authority for antisocial behaviour, in relation to shisha places. There's always parking issues around that area. So police are really concerned that a premise of this size is only going to contribute further to those issues that are already a problem within that area. So the police believe that the parking of 18 spaces are not adequate enough for the size of the premise. With a premise of this size, it will contribute further to the traffic that is already problematic. Most of the shisha places in the area You've got Coronation Road, which is also problematic, and you have many other shisha places within that industrial estate. They don't have parking either, and the traffic around there is horrific at times, and the antisocial behaviour and crime and disorder is really bad in that area. And we believe that a premise of this size would only contribute further towards that. I welcome that the applicant has agreed with the conditions. I believe that 5 SIA, which I believe was in my communication, is proportionate for the size of the premise, bearing in mind you've got 2 floors with the terrace as well. So you've got SIA on the door, and then you've got them on the 2 other floors, especially if it's going to be a full capacity. There's a lot of floor area there for them to cover. So I believe that 5 SIA is proportionate. And the conditions that were proposed, again, we believe that they are proportionate for such an establishment. So the police, I make my representation because due to the size of the premise and the area that it's in, it's obviously going to contribute a lot further to crime and disorder.
Thank you. Any questions from the applicant?
No questions, Chair, at this stage, no.
Okay. Any questions from the councillors? Councillor Munro.
Chair, no questions.
Okay. Councillor Kumar.
No, I'm fine because quite a lot of them have been addressed, so I'm okay with it. Thank you.
I've got one question. Obviously, just earlier, Mr. McCann said that they would be happy to reduce hours to the core hours. Would that be something that that you would find acceptable?
Yes, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, so that would be something.
Yeah, I did in my original communication with the applicant, I did suggest about core hours, and he came back and said that he would agree. I know he's obviously been given misled information from another agent, but yes, we would be happy with core hours.
Thank you. If I move to Noise and Nuisance Officer, please.
Thank you, Chair. As mentioned in my initial objection, our concern was mainly with regards to the music and the dispersal. I'll address the music as the regulated entertainment has now been removed from the application. That no longer gives us any concerns, any reason of concern with regards to that and the impact that this could have on nearby residents. But we're still concerned about the gathering and dispersal of patrons outside the venue, trying to access any public transport or driving from the premises. As PC Smart mentioned earlier, it's the same issue with regards to a lot of premises nearby, increases the traffic flow, plus, so I'm just trying to look at my notes as well at the same time. And this has not been addressed in the application at all. I understand that they're going to submit a dispersal policy, but we have not seen that yet. And it's very difficult for me to say, yes, they are going to resolve this when they haven't presented any information whatsoever with regards to this. So I'm in a difficult position to comment until I see that dispersal policy. As you know, there are residents on North Acton Road, which are around, I think, 240 meters away. So it's not far if you take into consideration that those patrons would walk back. And if they head that way, that would disturb a lot of residents on that road late at night. Yeah, as I said, until the applicant provides a dispersal policy, my position remains the same with regards to these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the applicant?
No, Chair. I mean, I think if it's okay with you, I can just mention these by summing up. I can respond to 1 or 2 points.
Councillors Munro or Councillor Kumar?
Sorry, can I just ask our officer, around, are you saying that without the dispersal policy, you still oppose the application be granted? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because I still have concerns with it. And as I said, the applicant has not provided any information when it comes to this and how they're going to address these concerns. I think they should have looked into it before submitting an application. And I think they have mentioned in the application that they're aware of the other premises in the area regards to shisha places. So I remain of the same opinion that they should have addressed this before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Kumar?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask Councillor Kate Crawford as an objector if you'd like to make a representation?
Yes, I would.
Thank
you. Thank you. Anyone who walks or responds to complaints, whether it's the police, other agencies, or a local councillor, knows very well that Park Royal at after 10:30 to about 2 in the morning, but specifically, 11 to 1:30 there's a swarm of activity, cars everywhere, and most of it is related to taking shisha somewhere. And Mr. McCann mentioned that that the restaurant would not actually get the wrong the wrong crowd. Well, there's no wrong crowd. Everyone, I've been with officers early in the mornings, and they're a fabulous crowd. They're just like anyone else. They talk in an animated way, and they create noise. So there are two issues here. It's the unknown with this application. It's also an unknown because this is an area that is going to have even more residential developments. So the car parking is totally inadequate. It's totally disproportionate to the capacity of patrons. And my worry is very much the similar activity using probably, walking up from the ground floor to the first floor and then going to the terraces. Why do you have to have terraces? Most restaurants, because there's also a comment about it being very much like a stylish Italian restaurant. You don't need terraces for smokers, and I really don't know. So I would actually say, if councils are minded to give this to award licensing permission, then a license, then that terrace has to be those two terraces really have to be thought through, because noise carries. And I won't name it, but North Acton Road, we've had serious issues with noise, and it was a restaurant, and large parties going, using the facility and coming out. And whether they're coming out at different times, it makes no odds, because if there's alcohol consumed, people are coming out, and I think one of the chair of the Residents Association mentioned the banging of doors. They had years and years of it. And I think it's unreasonable, Mr. McCann, to say, well, if there's a problem, there will be enforcement. This costs a tremendous amount of money and suffering from residents. So I would like it. I don't see enough information. I do not see why you have to have those terraces open. If it's a fabulous, noisy restaurant, that's fine, except for the parking. Then you have windows and you have insulation. but you don't actually have the right to create noise, which is going to carry in the summer months. So I think this is totally inappropriate. It is, it is not well thought through. So I think you've got how I feel on this matter. And I'd like to say I've been a councillor in this area for about 23 years, and I do a lot of visiting at night. So I'm quite experienced at and often do support applications like this, but I don't think this is one I would support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Does anybody have any questions for Councillor Crawford? Nope. Okay, great. So yeah, I can. I think we've heard from everyone. So thank you very much for that. I'd just like to confirm any conditions. So one that picked up Mr. McCann was accepting core hours. Would you agree to that as part of the application?
Chair, I think you're leading me down a path and I should join you down this path. Yes, I think we would accept, if you mind to grant core hours. I think what we would like to do if this application is granted is core hours, and the restaurant's successful, and we'd like to go for later hours in the future. We sit down with the statutory authorities and get their backing before any application for extra hours are made, which of course objections are received, the application will be refused. I realise there's a sense of the unknown, and certainly I think any variation in the future will have an open restaurant which we'll be able to have pictures of, and a thriving website, etc. I think it'll be a much better indication of what we are doing. Whereas now it's a blank canvas. So I appreciate it can be difficult to imagine. So the short answer is yes. I think we would accept core hours. Thank you.
And the other concern was about the dispersal policy, and you agreed that you would want to work with the police and the statutory authorities to work on an agreed. So would you be happy for that to be a condition?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think it's slightly...
Because we haven't seen that, and we've heard from representations about concerns about that, and I think the panel will probably agree with me that we all have concerns about that. That's something that, given the nature of the area and the size of the proposed venue, it is very, very important, and it brings up great concerns for all of us. So, would that be something you'd agree to then?
Yeah, definitely, Chair. I think it's just slightly unfortunate that the statutory authorities didn't see my submissions, my request for further discussion and have concerns. So I think regardless, I'd like to have meetings with them before we open. So the answer is yes again.
Okay, so those were the two that I picked up. If I'll just quickly ask my colleagues if they picked up on any other agreed conditions during this hearing so far.
Sorry, Chair. I just had a question for the applicant and their representative. I know it might, I'm just wondering, because we don't have the dispersal policy and really the application lacks some sort of a business plan or operational sort of details, is the applicant proposing to carry on with this application to a decision, or would they consider not carrying on and come back with an application which was more rounded and actually did have the issues that have been raised? It's just a question I'm putting forward to the applicant and their representative.
I think, sorry, Councillor and Chair, we've come to this point. I think the opportunity to pull the application was some weeks ago, and I think to go through the process again of Mr. Marden to pay my very reasonable fees again, I think is a step too far. Certainly, we'd be happy to have conditions on a license, but a business plan has to be submitted prior to opening. We'd be happy to have a condition on a license that the dispersal policy has to be discussed and circulated to all the statutory authorities. But I think at this late stage, and after having been on the hearing for a couple of hours, to now suddenly withdraw the application is not something we would like to do. So yeah, that's the short answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. So I've added the business plan to one of the conditions that you've agreed to. Okay. So I'll move on to summing up for now. So if I ask the responsible authorities and objectives if they'd like to very briefly sum up, because I think we've all probably said most of what we wanted to. PC Smart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just keep it brief that obviously police have concerns in relation to the size of the premise, the amount of traffic it's going to bring, the noise it's going to bring, it's going to contribute further to the already problematic area around crime and disorder and social behaviour. I do welcome the reduced hours and believe that the conditions proposed by myself are proportionate and adequate enough for the licensing objectives to be promoted should a licence be granted.
Thank you. Go to Mimi Stipu.
You're on mute. Sorry.
Apologies and apologies. Thank you, Chair. Our position remains the same as I stated earlier, and I understand, because I don't know if the applicant is going to challenge me on the fact that I'm mentioning crime and disorder, because dispersal policy and it comes more under the police, but it will also cause noise problems and maybe minor ASB, and the major stuff can be addressed by the police, but we're still concerned as there's no dispersal policy in place and no management. We don't know what that premise is going to be. As the applicant said, it's still a planning well, it's currently, I think the planning application is currently pending. It's very difficult to discuss something when we haven't got the relevant information. And as I said, our position remains the same, and we have concerns with regards to the dispersal and social behaviour that could potentially be a major problem in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Crawford, if I could ask you to briefly sum up.
Okay, so I think it's noise coming from the terrace. So when you were talking about conditions, no one mentioned or the time that it was going to. I think that has to be a condition. 9:30 or drinking up, whatever, but 10 o'clock at the latest, closing. And it's really difficult because the parking issues and the SIAs, how far along North Acton Road would they go? There are loads of issues, and I think the amount of patrons that they're expecting, particularly when the majority of them, in my experience, will be going there late night, particularly with the 10s, they've said that they really are keen to have 10s. And something that I forgot to mention earlier was they're talking about having lots of screening events, football festivals, wrestling, American wrestling. I mean, this is crazy stuff for an upmarket Italian restaurant. So if the committee are minded to agree this, which I think is very difficult because they haven't mentioned where these screens will be, and if they're going to, and would they be planning to have them on the terrace? There are so many ifs and don't knows about this. It's too, I think, going for an application, a license at this time, when really I think it's ill considered. So I'm minded to ask the subcommittee to reject giving a license at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. And I'll now ask the applicant to briefly sum up, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the quality of the application, the detail provided, I think we have taken considerable steps since the application was lodged to clarify our intentions. And certainly in this borough, I've had an application granted for a piece of space that doesn't actually exist anymore for a project was 4 years away. So to say that this is premature to make an application now, I would disagree. There is a concern that we may not reach the heights to which we aspire. And in that respect, Chair, we are happy to have a core hours license with conditions that are far more onerous than you would expect of a normal restaurant if this was another branch of Pizza Express, for example. I think if you're minded to grant, we'd be happy with those conditions, and then we could come back to you with a track record in due course and respectfully ask you perhaps to amend certain conditions or restrictions on the license. But again, that is something for the future. I think there's a number of aspects being discussed today which are planning points. This license committee, not a planning committee. And finally, just to add that please don't tar us for the sins of others. Whilst this is not a cumulative impact zone, and we have no residents here today complaining about noise, the fear of noise directly from my client's premises, and hence the reference to roof terraces being open later to 9:30. If there are problems in the area, we would encourage the statutory authorities to pursue them and to give a responsible operator the chance to run a new business. Chair, you've been very patient, and thank you for your time. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We will, the panel will retire now to deliberate with the legal advisor and the clerk. I think, Cornelia, what time do you think we are looking at in terms of coming back for the decision?
It's at your discretion, Chair, perhaps, I don't know, half an hour, I don't know. But what I would ask is whatever time we decide, if we could ask everybody except the panel members, myself and the legal advisors to stay in this meeting, and then the participants to join us for the decision in approximately half an hour. I don't know
So
what.
if we say that 4:30 for the decision?
Yep, that's fine.
So, Chair, do I log off now with my client?
Yeah, can we stay here or go?
No, you need to exit the meeting.
Oh, okay, I'll exit now. I'll log back on.
But then you can, yes, log back on at 4:30.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Great, thank
Thank you.
Chair, shall I stop the live feed now?
Please.
I'll stop the